Hello, everyone. Good afternoon on a Sunday. Welcome you all. This is Ravi Gupta. I am the CEO and founder of this company called Elets Technomedia Private Limited. We are a 17-year-old media and research organization. We have been bringing out four important magazines. One is called E-Governance, which focuses on government and policy. Another magazine is called E-Health, which focuses on innovation in healthcare. Another magazine we have called Banking and Finance Post. And another magazine is called Digital Learning. And we run this as a print medium and also as our online portals. And we have been organizing conferences on these and related topics for last 17 years, and we have reached out to around 75 cities in this country and done around like 300 odd conferences in India and abroad on several issues related to various sectors of the government. And we have been like closely working with the state and the local municipal and district authorities on organizing several workshops, conferences and training programs to collect a lot of knowledge from the ground level and disseminate it to the policy makers for policy development. So today we are having an esteemed panel with us, and we are going to focus on the tourism and the hospitality sector and the travel sector. And we are going to discuss about what are the challenges and opportunities, if any, in this situation of COVID-19 and how do we handle this crisis. We are joined by Shri Avinash Mishra, who is the advisor at Tourism and Culture for Niti Aayog. Welcome, Avinash. We are honored to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you.
We are joined by Ashish Gupta, who is CEO of Faith Association for Travel and Hospitality. Ashish, welcome to this panel.
Thank you. Thank you.
We are joined by Gaurav Bhatnagar, who is co-founder of TVO. And we are joined by Sanjay Basu, who is a chairman of Adventure and Travel Sector Council for the CII. So as we, before we start, we are going to request Sanjay Basu to present, make a small presentation which talks about the overall scenario of the sector, the challenges and the possible solutions. And then we open the panel for discussion. Sanjay, welcome.
Thank you very much. I will just do a share screen to put the presentation on. So, looking at the impact of COVID-19 on Indian tourism and hospitality sector, just covering it in three segments of survival, revival, and growth. Moving on to just categorizing how important the sector is for the country. 9.2% of the GDP, 8.1% of the total employment. And then would like to just give some recommendations. Here, this is an impact which is unique in history of travel and tourism. We are looking at nearly 2 crore job loss in the organized sector and a 2.5 crore in the ancillary and the unorganized sectors, with a $28 billion impact on exports and a 2 to 3 lakh crores in domestic travel revenues. The medium, the micro, small, medium and mid-sized enterprises in this sector are going to be really badly hurt because the impact started in February with travel restrictions starting from different parts of the world and is expected to last for 12 to 18 months because a lot of travelers all over the world are basically saying that they would not like to travel till the vaccine is found. And this is the size of the industry which is going to be impacted by this setback in the economy, and this is going to be all over the world. And Indian tourism and hospitality is very much going to be part of that worldwide impact. And then if we come to specific recommendations, I would like to say that this is again just a slide on the overall size of the industry that's going to be impacted in details. The industry really needs a very serious hand-holding from the government, because we're going to be on a zero cash flow basis for the year 2020, with the first signs of revival expected only in January 2021. And then again, the off season is going to set in for 6 months from April through till September, with really normalization going to be expected only in October 2021. So, we do need moratoriums, we do need extra working capitals, overdraft facilities. We do need statutories to be deferred, TCS exemption under GST. So this is an entire list of various requirements of the industry. I will not go into details because these have already been represented to the government in detail. SCIS and EPCG could be one of the first reliefs that the industry could get, because this is part of the existing schemes of the government. And if this can be expedited to give the first feeling of an oxygen to the industry, which now for a month plus has been without any cash flows. We are already seeing thousands of jobs getting lost, and this is going to only mushroom to a greater level as time passes. If we look at revival, we are, like I mentioned, 73% of the prospective travelers who were polled in North America said that they are not going to travel till the vaccine is found. This is the reality. This is also logical. And this could potentially mean that the recovery of the industry is going to be set back by 12 to 18 months. We were the first to be impacted as a sector. We have been the most impacted, and we will be the longest impacted amongst all the sectors. And, like I mentioned about the job loss, that is already very much visible. What the government would really be required is, apart from the bailout package that the industry has been asking for, to also, once the COVID-19 pandemic starts to subside, to come out with a worldwide marketing campaign to portray how well India faced in this whole situation, and how safe India is for travel, to attract the markets back. Coming to the growth, India is potentially amongst the top 10 destinations of the world. The World Economic Forum had rated India's cultural heritage as being the 8th greatest, natural heritage as being the 5th greatest, and India's natural history has been rated as the 10th greatest. Presently, India is ranked as 40th greatest destination and accounts for 9.2% of the GDP. If it is given adequate support at this stage to save the collapse of the industry, because if the industry does collapse, then the recovery will be set back by 2 to 3 years, because the entrepreneurial base and the companies would no longer be existing. And if the support is given, this industry, if it ramps itself to be amongst the top 10 in the world, can account for over 20% of the GDP and add approximately another 2.5 crore direct jobs and a similar number of livelihoods in the unorganized sector. India's impressive natural heritage and our world ranking on natural heritage is 5th to 6th in 141. However, our ability to attract tourists to natural attractions is very low, at 110 out of 141, with limited tourism receipts. As an industry standing at over 700 billion worldwide and growing in double digits, India can convert USD 70 billion new revenues if the sector is given strong support. absence of relevant policies from center aggregate to the present situation of being very low. An overarching ecotourism policy is required for a sustainable growth, making it as a forest-friendly activity, which certainly would help in increased tourism receipts. And the reason why I'm saying this is because uh, I do want to mention that ecotourism is, by its very nature, a, industry which does a social distancing, and therefore the first potential growth which can come in is going to be through this sector, because people feel safer in a pandemic or a post-pandemic situation to be in the middle of nature. Other long-standing tourism and hospitality demands of the industry, which need really urgent attention, is for this industry to be treated as a deemed export status under the GST rules, and where forex of both goods and services are treated at par, especially as the marketing effort in tourism happens overseas and is a motivational effort to attract tourists to the country. This is even possible under Section 147 of the GST law if the government focuses on it. As an interim, reduce GST from the present 12 to 18% on hotels plus 5% on tour operators to single-digit percentages, as this will spur volumes, and the growth of tax collection because of greater volumes would be far greater than the low volumes at the moment seen with with in both the direct and indirect tax collections. And please grant tourism and hospitality sector as an industry status, as this is something that is very critical for the sector to really grow. That is essentially my presentation, and I would end it by saying, we have to really look at it in three categories: crisis rescue package, revival process, and then finally growth, for this industry to achieve its true potential of being 20% of the economy, and provide for 5 crores plus of jobs in the formal sector and 5 crores in the informal sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjay ji. Very informative and comprehensive presentation you have made. May I request Ashish Gupta to give your perspective and also give an introduction about your organization.
Yeah, hi. Thank you. How much time do I have, please?
So just speak for 5 to 7 minutes at max, and then we will come again for a second round. Yeah.
All right. To all your listeners, my name is Ashish Gupta. I'm the consultant CEO of FATE, which is Federation of Associations of Indian Tourism and Hospitality. This is the apex policy and strategy body of the 10 national tourism and travel associations. So very quickly, just to the crux of the whole issue, what is the impact of COVID-19 on this sector? Let me break it down very simply for you. India gets around 5 tourism segments. Number one, which is the inbound segment. Number two, which is the segment which is the domestic holiday segment. All of us travel domestically and to other places. So there are domestic travel and domestic outbound from India. Then there is the corporate segment, people who travel for work, and then there is MICE, which is the meetings, incentives, etc. So let's start with the inbound. Inbound is people who come from outside the country. It's around $28 billion plus and around 10.5 million plus foreign tourists. Now, all of that segment in the financial year 21 is supposed to be completely hit, which means all of the $28 billion of the export value, and approximately 10.5 million foreigners will be completely hit because of what we know, the tragedy going into in these markets. They'll be financially, structurally, and emotionally incapable of traveling. The domestic segment is approximately, and you'll be surprised, there's around 1.7 billion falls within the country. And mostly it's got three key segments, which is the summer holiday season, which is the one that we are currently getting into, the Durga Puja and the December. The summer holiday season, as you are aware, we are in the lockdown status, and it's likely that this season is just going to be available this particular year. So most of the 60% or 65% of the whole domestic market will be completely shut down in this particular season. And most of us travel on holidays during this time. We travel outside the country, and because of what's happening in terms of COVID-19, the domestic travel outside is completely shut down. The corporate segments are on a travel freeze. There are conferences or events, and even after lockdown moves out, that it's not expected that that is going to happen. And similarly, so as you have seen for Olympics, etc., most of the meetings, groups, large intels, conferences, they are deferred for next year. So, in a sense, the total size of the Indian tourism industry, the whole foreign exchange market, which is $28 billion plus, the whole domestic tourism market, which is estimated 2.5 lakh crores plus, the value of that will be completely at risk. So, we are estimating around a value at risk of around 5 lakh crores. And it's estimated that there are 2 crores plus jobs in the formal sector and around 2.5 approximately unorganized sector. Now, unorganized sector, oil tourism, as you all see, we are not using any tourism activity. All of them are effectively unemployed as of right now. And in the organized sector, we are estimating that around 70% of that are going to be at a huge risk their jobs. So around 3.5 crore of jobs will be at risk. So what does it mean? It means very simply three things. Number one, there is no cash coming in. And if there's no cash coming in, then we as an industry, we still have to have three kinds of cash outflows. Number one, to the banking. Number two, for the government at statutory provisions at the central, state, and municipal level. And then number three, all of us have salaries and establishment costs. So what are we requesting the government? Keeping all this context and the fact that the whole economic activity of tourism will be completely undermined for the whole financial year 21, we are requesting three things, some of which have been partially addressed. Number one, we are requesting banking deferment and a moratorium of loans and interest, no penal interest and interest. So it's happened for 3 months. You would request it to be extended to 12 months, and there should not be any compounding of interest in that particular period. Number two, we request government for all central, state, and municipal statutory obligations to be stopped for the current financial years. So be it advance taxes, be it GST, be it TF, be it ESI, be it property taxes, fixed power tariffs, fixed water tariffs, and any other license fees, etc., excise needs to be deferred for 12 months without any penal interest or any penalty. And number three, we just looked at the size of the whole population in terms of employment. We request that the government puts up a fund to support salaries of all the employees. And we are not looking at a grant. We want the government to give us a long-term interest-free loan for around 10 years, so that all the establishments in tourism, travel, and hospitality can pay back their employees and run their organization. And it needs to be a very soft loan, so paid over 10 years, and principal only and no interest. So what will this ensure? It will ensure that people are not unemployed, that the business is still running, demand keeps on getting generated, and by the time the bus comes back on track, the industry is still intact. So in a sense, this is what our request is to the central government. How do they achieve it? It's not easy at all, because tourism is central and at center and state both. So for that, we have requested government, the central and the state government needs to have a legislative body like the GST Council, which needs to work on it collectively. And for the first time, the whole industry is standing together. So as Faith, we have looked in all the bodies. You heard CII, we looked in FICCI, we have looked in PLT chambers, we have looked in SHM, we have looked in the mobile. We have got everyone working together with one voice, requesting the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister. The country is first, but let's ensure that the industry doesn't break down. These are my initial thoughts, and we can look at a reward subsequently. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashish. Very pertinent points. One suggestion is, and a lot of people are writing that your net connectivity is not good. So if you have a laptop, please join with a laptop so that we can listen to you better. Like audio was not clear at all. So that's it.
All right.
Yeah. May I request Gaurav Bhatnagar from TBO to speak, please.
Thank you, Ravi, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm the co-founder for TBO Group. As an introduction, TBO runs world's largest travel agent platform. More than 100,000 plus travel agents all over the world use our platform for making airline, hotels, package bookings worldwide. We operate in more than 100 countries. India is obviously our largest market, and more than 50,000 travel agents in the country use our platform for making hotel bookings and flight bookings. So I definitely bring the travel agent perspective on the table, and a lot of what Ashish and Sanjay said is especially true for travel agencies, because travel agency is a very it's a small enterprise, very people driven businesses, and today we are in a situation where the cash flows have gone zero. In fact, not just zero, the cash flows have gone negative because there is such a huge queue of refunds that need to be processed. So I think Sanjay covered a lot of pertinent points on what we require as an industry from the government. I just want to add one more suggestion to it, and saw this happen in Brazil. So I just put it on the table, maybe something that the government can look at in India as well. In Brazil, the government came out with a notification saying that all travel-related refunds can be done only as credit notes, and no cash refunds can be demanded by the end customers, that are travelers, and they can redeem those credit notes over a period of 12 months. So when the government does a notification like that, it has a very powerful impact. It immediately stops the the outflow of cash that is happening right now for us and the travel industry as a whole. So it's a very easy kind of no cost solution for the government. And if such a notification was to be done, we can immediately curb the negative cash flow that's happening on account of refunds. The other things, the stat liabilities, the employee, the payroll, we cannot control. But even if the government mandated that any travel related refunds can only happen as credit notes for the next 12 months, I think that will be a big relief for the industry as a whole. Apart from that, we've been dealing with this crisis for well over a month now. And after the initial shock of the crisis and the disbelief that, how will business survive, we have to really start looking at it as what does this present as an opportunity for the country. And one big opportunity for us is that today the entire world's travel is stopped. So everybody is at day zero now. It's a clean slate. The number of travelers who visit Europe and the number of travelers who visit in India, or a number of travelers who go to US, is same, is zero. Right? So now when the revival starts to happen, we can really prepare ourselves in a much better manner to grab a bigger share of inbound travel, which we have compared to what we have gotten in the past. In Egypt, I remember Egypt had a major crisis, around the Arab Spring time. And then Egypt came when they started to revive their industry sector. Egypt had come up with this idea that they said that every family will contribute 1% to the travel industry. For a country like Egypt, which has a lot of tourism potential, and probably India has even bigger tourism potential, I think if the government creates an initiative which aggressively trains and employs people into the travel industry, I think it will work in a big way. By and large, travel industry is a self-employed kind of a sector where most people employ themselves, provided they have the right skill set, the right platforms. So it would be great if we were to start looking at it from perspective that now when travel comes back, we build a more educated, more sophisticated workforce, which is able to position India better. Because I think that is one thing when I compare with how we sell India or how rest of the world sells their own destinations, I think we lack that right now. So we have an opportunity now. It's a break, right? We have a large number of travel sellers, people who, travel consultants who are really effectively without any jobs for the next several months. Maybe the government can come up with an initiative where they can be paid a small stipend if they were to upgrade their skill set to learn about selling new destinations within the country, whether through inbound customers or domestic tourism as well. And if they were subsisted with a small stipend for doing this, I think that will be a great initiative. What will happen is, once the sector starts to revive, we will have a large workforce which is better prepared to showcase India as a attractive tourism destination. So that's those are a couple of things that we really hope can be taken up in our small ways. We're already doing that. We run an online academy called the TBO Academy, where we're running extensive courses for travel agents. Everything is free of cost. We are running extensive courses on various destinations within India, outside of India, to make sure that the travel industry by and large can use this time to upskill themselves for the challenges that lie in the future. So those are my initial thoughts, and I'll contribute more as we go through this panel.
Thank you, Gaurav. Great inputs. Maybe lesson from Avinash Mishra ji from the Niti Aayog, advisor Niti Aayog. Avinash.
Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Actually, after listening Mr. Basu as well as Mr. Gupta and also Mr. Bhatnagar, who has really presented the present scenario, which is there in case of the travel and tourism sector. I would like to say the vital inputs are there from the tourism sector in our economy. That's it is contributing 9.4%, and particularly in cases that there is a shift needed from agriculture to some other sector, because we have overemployed the people in agriculture sector. We find the tourism sector is the only sector where the immediate employment is possible. And in this particular sector, actually, to face the dent of the something like Corona is really a big stumbling block. The government is seriously thinking that what measures we should take post-pandemic. I would rather request the industry's experts to share some of the suggestions. Of course, the complete big tally will not be possible, but few, 3-4 which can be included and could be considered. For instance, what Mr. Bhatnagar has said, that the upskilling of the already existing the people, those who are in the tourism and travel industry. So I'll certainly see that this is very much required, because a lot of tourism destination we have got, and despite of the fact we are unable to sell. I do agree that there are some infrastructural gaps that also being pointed out, and we are thinking. And this pandemic situation, which is all across the world, and as Mr. Gaurav has said, that we are at 0-0, so is the 0-0 is for that matter, the France and many other countries, those were very much developing. So we all need to start, and let our start be a much more brighter, a much more forward than anybody else could be. We could really think of to sell the ecotourism, for which we are having the maximum possible destination for ecotourism. We have got many destination of historical history-based tourism sector. So certainly we can think of on that matter. I would recall that after the World War II, US could gear up in a big way. And because various industries and defense installations, those days initiated to supplement the World War II, they really could carry forward the further, and the living standard of American people could raise. So basically this is a pause time, and it's a 0-0 time, while we all should think that what the structural changes are required in this sector. I certainly agree the structural changes are required. We have got only one palace on wheels. Why we can't have the multiple rail tourism like this, as it is happening there in Europe, Euro rail system. So that sort of thing could be there. As far as the industry problem is concerned, I do agree that certain measures, economic measures, do require. And if all may recall that the repo rate has been reduced, as a result 0.75%, effectively the interest rate will come down. And also the installments, EMI installments for 3 months got staggered. So that also need to be thought of. As far as the another funds which could be developed, like on the lines of Manrega. Like Manrega fund is there to support the lowermost strata people there in the rural area. There could be some fund for supplementing the people, those who are engaged in the tourism sector. We are thinking on these lines, and perhaps we will be able to come out with some such type of situation. As far as the support to the GST, income tax, and all other is concerned, they are the vital issue. And I think if industry comes in a reasonable manner, really what should be done in the way, as you all know, and as we all know, that government itself is running the crisis of funds. So what really can be done more rationally, if that suggestion is there, I am sure that we will push forward and will come out in much stronger way. So that's what we think. But certainly, this is the point while we should all think and should see how the structure should be developed so the sector can be really promoted. I understand that lot many self-employed people, like 1 lakh travel agents, something like 53,000, the people, those who are engaged in transport and all, they are in a big problem. And this is a problem we are also thinking. We are also thinking that the interstate taxes on tourists, that should be minimized, or it should be made such a uniform that for a year there should not be. So the tourism industry can be boosted. And one more thing which is very important, that we have got around 26 million outbound tourists. Those are going out from India. They are going to Singapore, they are going to UAE, they are going to US. We can really think of to retain them, contain them. We can also think of to MICE conferences, what we are having for the meeting industries, conference for the exhibition and all. So that can be there in our country only. There's a lot of potential, and lot of expenses are already being incurred by the Indian industries from outside. So these are certain measures which we are seriously thinking, and we will certainly come out. And we do require a helping hand in terms of the suggestions, in terms of some concrete measures from the industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Avinashi. Uh, Great inputs on various points you have provided. Uh, Sanjay, you want to uh, speak about, although like you have covered both the challenges and the opportunities to handle and wish to handle the situation, but you want to elaborate on like some of the issues and highlight some other concerns. Please speak, Sanjay.
Thank you. I think at this point where the industry is standing is really looking at its self as on a survival mode. At this point, we do not see till the month of December 2020 any cash flows coming through at all. And this is, like I said, across the board throughout the world. A lot of governments all over the world, from countries like Malaysia, Singapore, to, of course, the more advanced countries like US, UK, Germany, Spain, etc., have stepped in primarily for this sector to save the jobs of the people. Countries have stepped in with anything from 50 to 80% direct transfer of salary for people who are employed in this sector, because to save the organizations that fuel the functioning and growth of the sector and its teams of highly trained individuals is critical at this point, if we do not want this sector with which is 9.2%, 9.4% of the GDP, with a potential of crossing 20%, to be damaged for a 3-year period, which would lead to a shrinkage of the GDP as presently standing by 3 to 4%, and would delay the growth of making it cross by 20% by nearly 5 to 6 years. I think that is the most important thing. Of course, revival and growth are essentially requirements where systematic changes need to be made on certain rules, certain laws, which I have already spelt in the presentation. But right now, what the industry really needs and is crying for is that urgent relief by the government, which also the industry is not asking for as grants. Please arrange for the banking system to give loans to the industry, because at the moment the financial sector has rated the industry to be high risk. So all the RBI's steps of creating the fund for commercial banks to release money into the system, into the economy, is not going to be accessed by tourism and hospitality, because the banks rate them as being high risk. And that money is needed to be reaching to the organizations so that salaries can be paid, organizations can survive, and the teams of the professionals can be there to bring the revival and growth in the subsequent periods post pandemic. So right now, please, I think 1 month and we'll see nearly a damage of about 10 to 15% to the industry. 2 months and that is going to balloon to even a greater level. Thank you.
Sanjay ji, I just have a question. You mentioned that till December we will see zero cash flows. So aren't you going to see some revival in like everyone hopes that the situation may improve, the corona situation may improve by July. So will the domestic tourism or domestic conferences industry take off by July or August? Like, do you see that situation happening, Sanjay ji?
So the American Society of Travel Agents and another body, Virtuoso, did a survey in North America, and 73% of prospective travelers have said that they do not intend to travel till a vaccine has not been found. Because at this point, from what it has been seen, even in China, once the pandemic goes down, there is a resurgence that happens. And especially the market that comes to India, which is the 40 and 50-year-old plus market, that is more susceptible to the disease, and therefore they tend to be more risk averse, and they are tending to poll that they will await the vaccines coming. The earliest the vaccine is expected to come is anything from 10 months to 18 months. So we are going to be seeing an impact. Also, countries like UK and Australia have locked down for 6 months. Once they open, another 3 months would be a revival process in their economies, in their own mindsets, overcoming the fear psychosis. We can very safely say that 9 months from now is definitely a washout. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjay ji. Ashish, you want to add some points on what Sanjay has said, or you have some more points to add on the situation and the possible solutions?
Yeah, this crisis is worse ever than the combined crisis of 2009, of 9/11, and even deeper than the World War II and Great Depression for the tourism industry. Now, it's perfectly understandable the situation of the government and response first for the primary sector, the marginalized one. However, our tourism industry is set up to receive more than 11 billion tourists in foreigners and around 1.8 billion domestic travelers. What happens when they don't travel? What happens? There is no cash. Then what happens to the salaries? What happens to the funding? What happens to all the license fees, etc., that you have to pay? So clearly, if this doesn't get taken care of, as and when there is a revival of sorts, the industry will not be in a position to stand up. It would have already collapsed, which is where our request, and we are working very closely with the government. We start with the Prime Minister's office, the Finance Minister, the parliamentary panel, uh, obviously Niti Aayog, Avinash is there. Our request is very straightforward. Obviously, it's very deep. We need to first and foremost look at two key things. Obviously, the first thing is the survival aspect of the industry. And as Avinash rightly said, we need to solution as something which is workable for the industry and for the government. And then comes the revival. So the question that you would ask, let's focus, since you initially focused on survival, and you asked a very pertinent question, will revival not happen at all? Revival will happen. And the global markets will not revive as of right now. The revival will largely be led by the domestic market. And that is where we have to work with the government. So what are the three things that we need to work on? I think GST is not going to, there's hardly going to be any GST collected in terms of absolute numbers. So this is a very good opportunity, first and foremost, for the government to declare the year and the next year as a GST tourism free year. So it's not a symbolic gesture to declare it as a GST tourism free year post after supporting everybody. That will be send a very strong message for when the revival starts happening. Second, we need to stimulate domestic markets at two levels. First is a retail market. So people like you and me, when you travel for holidays, let's give an LTA-like incentive for people. You spend $1.5 lakh or 2 lakhs and you get a tax-free exemption on that. That will stimulate us as a domestic market to start traveling, investing with authorized travel agents, tour operators, and hotels against GST-able invoices. Parallelly, we have to start stimulating, as Avinash rightly said, we have to start stimulating the MICE segment. So one of the suggestions is on the LTA for the retail segment, and the other is for the MICE segment, whereby we give them a 200% weighted exemption on the expenses. So the point that Avinash said, if you have 28 million people going out of the country, if we have to retain the MICE segment within the country, let's incentivize them to do so. And whatever expenses you spend, let's give you a 200% weighted tax exemption. So you will be incentivized to spend within the country. Those are the three key things that you need to focus on the revival aspect to start stimulating the domestic travel. But to even reach that stage, we need to start working on structuring a solution to pay salaries today. And the easiest thing to do that is obviously government will be constructed funds. As of September 2019, RBI had an outstanding gross banking credit to tourism and hospitality of around 56,000 crores. That, as a percentage of the total banking credit to the Indian system, was around 0.5%. The total banking credit was 96 lakh thousand crores. And there were no NPAs for tourism. So our suggestion to the government is set up this COVID-19 tourism fund. And out of this 56,000 crores, assuming say 50% of that is working capital, say 25,000 crores working capital, give it on the basis of a long-term interest-free loan, and this will be used to pay salaries. This will be used to pay the working capital of the tourism enterprises. So let's start supporting the tourism enterprises for survival as of today, because if you don't support them, then the revival issue, by the time revival actually happens, a lot of them would have fallen by the wayside.
Gaurav, your inputs on revival of this sector and survival of the sector.
Okay. So I think Ashish covered the domestic sector quite comprehensively. So let me talk a little bit about inbound. Inbound, it is true that it will be slow to revive, but the revival will be non-uniform. For example, we can already see that China domestic has started to revive, and China outbound will start to revive immediately after that. countries like South Korea, Japan, primarily most of Southeast Asia, where it looks like that they have contained the pandemic faster and better at this point in time, and very large travel market. They will be looking to travel again, hopefully later in this year. So one of the objectives that the government should have is, have a targeted approach towards these source markets. Whether it is promoting infrastructure and better, opportunities around, say, Buddhist tourism for Japanese coming into India, or just participating in more aggressive marketing in these source markets, or just making sure that the visa on arrival is truly seamless and frictionless and is probably zero cost, are some of the easy initiatives that can be taken to make sure that we are in the source markets faster and sooner than the other destinations. It's going to be a big competition. Most of the, Sanjay talked about 9% for India. For most countries, like Spain is at a 16% of the GDP, Italy is at a 14% of the GDP. So everybody is going to try and revive this sector first. Right. So now it is the opportunity for us to be the first in front of the customer in terms of making sure that we target the right source markets. We make sure that it is easy for them to travel over here. Whether it means working with the airlines to create more routes, more capacity, or whether it is just making sure that we work with the respective governments and their counterparts to make sure that they promote India as a safe, sustainable tourism destination. I think that is very important. So inbound can be revived provided we target our resources in the right direction, right? It is probably not going to serve much to look at the traditional source markets like a Germany or a UK or a US at this point in time. The second thing is, I think tourism infrastructure, to be very honest, our tourism infrastructure does not match with what exists elsewhere when it comes to inbound tourism, right? The standard is not there. But it's a big opportunity for massive capex investments, and we will not need those investments. Just overall as a country, we're going to need opportunities to create massive employment. If we were to use this opportunity to invest heavily into building out tourism specific infrastructure, that is something that the banks will be willing to fund because it's a clear opportunity. If the government is willing to put its guarantees behind it, nothing like it. And second, it creates thousands and thousands of new jobs, right? And these are not even just tourism jobs, these are construction jobs, these are real estate jobs. So I think that's very important, where if the government gave out some signals, some hints now saying that we're going to put this much money out specifically for building out a tourism infrastructure, I think it will send a very good message out. And the third bit is specifically in terms of cultural and historical tourism. We have plenty of both. And the biggest hub of cultural tourism is right now Europe, and Europe has been the hardest hit. So much as it is unfortunate, I think it is an opportunity for us to talk about how India has, a lot of culture, heritage, history. We have much more to offer, which we haven't presented well in the past. We have to look at who does this. So which source markets travel to Europe for cultural tourism and for historical tourism? And are we going to those source markets ourselves and saying, listen, India is a very, very interesting, equally adventurous destination that can be targeted. I think that is what we need to do when it comes to reviving inbound tourism. Let's look at specific markets, specific source markets, work with the respective governments, and make sure that we have mutual support on those with those markets to get people coming into India, people who have never really considered India as an opportunity.
Great points, Gaurav. Good points. I come to Avnash. Avnash, do you have any inputs on the points made by the panelists?
Before this corona incident could happen, we were already on a trajectory of a growth in tourism sector. Like for infrastructure, we have already enlisted 17 important destinations where actually the master plan and all has to be prepared along with the public-private partnership. And for this, some of the things have been done. And also in case, if you can see, the Humayun tomb in Delhi, the Red Fort, they all got revived. Regarding the visa on arrival was done already for 150 countries, and e-visa for 5 years, and it was also relaxed. The visa fee has been relaxed. But all of a sudden, in this fast-moving trajectory, the impact of the pandemic could certainly obstruct our growth. But we are thinking on the lines. We do aware what is happening there in Singapore, what sort of the packages are being released there, what the USA could do to their sector, and similarly, instead of thinking more towards the international tourism, it would be better that we should promote initially the domestic tourism, because the domestic tourism, we are too many in numbers. The population is too high, and we should really, and the reliability factor would also be there. So it's better to really push initially the domestic tourism. Among the trajectory, as I mentioned, the GST rates for the hotel rooms were also reduced. I think there may be some more thought process in this. If we can really reduce something more, the possible taxes, as I mentioned, the tax relating to the interstate tourism, interstate tourist operator on the travel part. So if all those can be done, initially we will try to trigger this domestic tourism, and thereafter the outbound tourism, we will contain them, the MICE one. And the third, we will certainly think to attract the more international tourists in terms of our eco facilities, eco-tourism, and all those we are able to do. We are developing the eco-tourism policy also, and we are thinking very quickly, because even in this period, we were seriously thinking, Niti Aayog was engaged, how the economy needs to be geared post-pandemic. So all these things and what is happening world over is very much in our the process of working, and we do think that will come out very rapidly. Thank you.
Thank you. May I request all the panelists here to kindly look at the Q&A section and the chat box on your screen and respond to some of the questions like which you find relevant to answer. So, and there are some questions which are directed to some of the speakers, so they can pick up those questions also. So I will start with Mr. Sanjay Basu to please look at the questions. I think there are some questions which are directed to you with your name.
CII has collected data. Both CII and Faith have collected data for India regarding the Indian inbound and domestic tourism. A lot of that data has already been given to the government, and that is actually the basis of which we have asked the government to step in and support the sector. Apart from that, there's one question which says, of course, the possibility of small enterprises and the business closing down, which I've already elaborated strongly, that the government needs to step in and ask RBI to tell the banks to give soft long-term loans to this sector so that it can survive this period and then go in for revival and growth subsequently. If there's any specific question that comes to my attention, apart from these,
there is a question on impact on branded versus unbranded hotels in India. You want to comment on that?
See, the branded hotels which belong to the larger organizations, for example, Taj Group of Hotels might have the Tata group of companies behind it, and the ITC Hotels, of course, has ITC as a company behind it. Those would have deeper pockets without doubt to be able to weather the storm. The individual small lodges, hotels, homestays, these are definitely going to be the first to feel the impact. And here again, I come back to the same point that the government needs to make the financial sector sensitive to support at this point, not look at the viability of the industry in the present scenario, but look at the viability from a long-term point of view.
Okay.
And well, there's one which is travel companies which are young, and it was something about ecotourism, which if I can find that question, I could handle that. But yes, ecotourism, like I mentioned, is one of those segments of the industry which provides for automatic social distancing and pristine environments where the feeling of being exposed to infections and diseases is lesser. Also, the markets tend to be younger and more active, and therefore do not suffer from that serious of fear psychosis, because younger people are able to survive this infection better. And therefore, a focus on that could be a great way to look at reviving the markets with that specific segment of the business coming to India, which has so much to offer in natural heritage. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjay. Ashish, you want to touch upon any of the questions or comments which many of the audience have raised here?
Yes, I'm sorry, my voice apparently is not clear to a couple of you, and my apologies, and I'll try and speak slowly now. Did glance through some questions. I think there is one which asks specifically the size of the impact of the of GDP for the sector for tourism that we were looking at. So I think the Indian GDP is approximately, I think, 200 lakh crores, and what we are asking for is just around 0.4% of that. And as I said, the total exposure of the Indian tourism, travel, and hospitality to banking and financial institution is around 50,000 crores, which is the total banking loan exposure. So even if you were to carve out, say, 50,000 crores or 40,000 crores for supporting all the tourism enterprises, and not as a grant, as Avinash was rightly saying, you need to work with the government on a solution, not as a grant, but as a long-term interest-free loan, that comes to a very, very small percentage of the total GDP size, which is approximately less than 0.5% of the total size of the Indian GDP. That's number one. Second, there are questions around domestic tourism. And as I mentioned earlier, the inbound tourism would continue to stay deflated for approximately 3/4 minimum of this year. So domestic tourism that we have to look at very strongly from a structural perspective. Overall GST perspective, the corporate perspective, incentivizing them, and a retail perspective. There's a question on TCS, and I must update that, and I'm sure you're aware that we had started pursuing the issue of TCS on travel agents since the time it was introduced in the finance bill, and we had met the Secretary DEA and Finance Minister. As you're aware, our key contention was that you're making the Indian travel agent uncompetitive by around 15%. You're already he's already uncompetitive by 5% because of GST, and you add 5 to 10% with this PAN card and without PAN card, you are effectively killing the Indian travel agent industry. You know, it has been deferred, it has been heard, but unfortunately, it has only been deferred till October 1st. We will not drop that ball. We will continue saying that the TCS on travel agents should not be put. It is an anti-competitive measure. It makes us it makes us an unlevel playing field versus the rest of the world. There is a question on medical tourism. I agree with you. There are multiple segments in India which need to be looked at. Medical and wellness tourism is a very, very strong segment considering India's spiritual and wellness heritage. And I think, as Gaurav rightly mentioned, we have to look into each of these specific segments and develop sophisticated and well-structured packages around that. But I think that is stage 3 or stage 2, if you must say, in terms of revival. I think the current thing, and we can't stress that enough, is that we need to start with immediately, and we're already late. Other governments have already stepped in. They have given 2 months or 3 months of grant for salary of tourism. We're not even asking for that. if we don't step in, all that we have worked for the past many years will completely collapse.
Uh, Ashish, I think we have, yeah. So Ashish,
Sorry, did you have a question for me, Ravi? Did
no,
you
no,
have a
no,
question
actually,
for me, Ravi,
I was
again?
asking that are you going to answer any other question or
Okay,
we'll
let
stop?
me. I think there is a question from someone saying that, I'm sorry, I think Professor, that everybody's asking for relief. That's correct. I think this is it, and will it impact the banking sector? You're absolutely correct. Everybody is asking for relief, and this is a time when quantitative easing has to happen. This is a time when the government has to become a welfare state, and the issues of fiscal deficit. And obviously, nobody is asking for the banks to become insolvent. That cannot happen. So there are the fact of the matter remains that at this point in time, we need to deepen the financial capability of each of the sectors, starting with sectors which are deeply hit like tourism. And if that doesn't happen, look at the amount of NPAs which are going to be which are going to come about. So to prevent that, it's an investment. You are reinvesting the tax money. You're reinvesting additional liquidity that you're creating. I think so. It's not a question of what will happen to the banks. It's a question of what will happen to the banks and the financial institution if we don't support sectors, for example, like tourism. So tourism and aviation together account for, I think, 90,000 crores of gross bank credit. If you don't support, that money is gone. It's just written. So I think that's there is a question about employee jobs, and as I said again, the first priority should be creating the jobs. We cannot get into the situation where people go jobless, which is where we are requesting set up immediately a fund. And for example, the scheme which the government came up on Provident Fund. Why just, I mean, how many organizations actually in tourism would have people less than 100, below 15,000, 90% of them? The government has a scheme called Provident Fund, Rozgar Awaz Yojana, which promotes Provident Fund, which gives Provident Fund for everybody. Why cannot tourism be covered under that for a specific purpose of time? And that's one. Second, ESI. The whole concept of an ESI contribution is that you give those funds to employees when they're not well. But this is exactly the situation we're in today. This is not preventive treatment. This is curative. This is not curative treatment. This is preventive treatment. We are at home because we want to keep ourselves medically safe under prescription from WHO, IMRC, and Government of India. And if there is a loss of pay, it needs to be covered and insured by ESI. So there are multiple solutions which can happen. It's just that we understand and appreciate the government is in a very difficult spot right now. But parallelly, if this sector is not addressed, we are going to face a huge catastrophe. I think mostly the other questions would be, I think, answered in a similar manner. Ravi?
Yeah. Gaurav, you want to add something on any of the questions?
Yeah, sure. So a couple of specific things that I noticed in the chat. One is somebody mentioned the Skill India program that the government runs, where there is a small stipend or like a small fee paid both to the trainer as well as to the trainee in certain sectors. I don't think, and I might be wrong on this, but I don't think travel agency business is covered in that as yet. But because the infrastructure and the framework already exists, if it could be covered, that's a great idea. Second, I also saw the mention of equalization levy. So Ashish covered a lot of things, and Sanjay also covered the TCS as well as the TDS on LRS payments. The equalization levy is a brand new thing that came up in the finance bill just last week of March, which essentially makes it just more expensive for us to be buying travel from overseas operators and selling it in India. Again, that's one of those things that we need to add to the list of things that we want to work with the government on, because it just puts us on an unfair playing ground vis-a-vis the foreign operators who operate in India without having presence over here. But in general, I think there is, the big question right now, which everybody is asking, and nobody has a real answer to, is what happens to jobs and how do we sustain for the next few months. Really, I don't think anybody has an answer to it. The government cannot answer it because every sector will go to them. But gathering from some questions asked in the forum and just my own thoughts, I have to say that thinking as entrepreneurs and largely travel business is very long tail driven by by small companies. So thinking as entrepreneurs, I think we can expect a U-shaped kind of a recovery to happen, which will mean that they will be, business will be near zero for a fair period of time. But when it starts to come back, it will come back fairly quickly. It may not still reach the levels that we were used to, say, pre-crisis. But my guess is that probably 80% of that we will start to see 12 months from now. Now, 12 months seems like a long time, and how do we sustain for 12 months? But there are a few things that we could all do. Somebody asked this question in the forum, should we be looking at hiring and just ramping up in preparation for that recovery to happen? My thought is absolutely yes. One thing that will become available, unfortunately, as a consequence of this crisis is talent. There is going to be a lot more talent available because of this crisis. There will be a lot more high quality talent at a lower cost available. So that is an opportunity if you wanted to look at it from that perspective. If you have the cash to hire at this point or over the next few months to prepare for that recovery to happen, absolutely. The other thing I saw people, a couple of questions on travel technology. So as a travel technology business ourselves, I think technology will play a very, very fundamental role once this crisis is over. Especially around corporate travel, I see corporates are going to be very, very careful about their travel spend once this crisis gets over. One thing I realize is that when people have, every corporate, forget the travel business, every corporate has gone back and looked at where can we save money. And everybody realizes, oops, we spend too much money on corporate travel. We spent too much money on travel. Why are we spending it? Why were we making these bookings? Who approved this travel? So corporate travel is the first one to come back. But I think, as a TMC or as a corporate travel technology provider, there are going to be opportunities to bring more streamlined, cost-effective ways to manage corporate travel. Whether it is just FID travel that happens for corporates traveling for their own business, or whether it is the MICE segment, technology will play a big role. So for travel technology companies, it's a very tough time because, technology spend is the last thing on anybody's mind now and probably for the next few months. But as the revival starts to happen, technology will play that role in bringing more automation, bringing cost of distribution to be lesser than what it is today. So we can only start preparing for that, right? And it's a tough situation where we don't know, are we preparing for a revival 2 months from now or 12 months from now? But that is the best we can do, right? So I think that's kind of the big takeaway right now. As a company, as a business, I can say that's the way we are looking at it now. That okay, the crisis has already happened. Not much we can do about it anymore, except neither can we do anything to influence how quickly revival happens. But once the revival starts to happen, can we start to imagine what would the world look like then, right? What will be the new source markets? Will be the new destinations? How will different sectors look like? How would corporate travel look like? How would leisure look like? How would group travel look like? And start preparing for that. So that's kind of the overarching message from our perspective. And unfortunately, no real answers, but only some food for thought.
Thanks, Gaurav. Good points indeed. I will request Avinash ji to give your views on and summarize the whole discussion also.
See, the discussion has remained very fruitful, and I could have so many inputs which I can certainly be useful in making those recommendations, placing them before on higher echelons in the government. But as far as the thinking which is prevailing, because with the all sorts of Q&A which I am seeing from the people, those who are interested in industry and those who might be in the industry, that it is not going to take that much time as we are all thinking. There is not going to be a 12, 13 months holiday for all of us, because even prior to this, our tourism industry was dependent around 80 to 85% on domestic tourism. and only 10 to 15% was the share from international tourism. Rather, we were, if you see the inbound and outbound, our outbound 26 million were going out. So considering that, we should really focus on all these things, that it is going to be for a period of a month only, or maybe till the pandemic situation continues. And after 10 to 15 days of that, the things will start change and it will start gaining the momentum. We should really see in what way actually we should facilitate our new business models and how it should come up. So those are the things the industry, while sitting idle, can really work on those, what Mr. Gaurav Bhatnagar has said. So I think these are all required. And as far as the government support is concerned, a very good input I could gather from the industry side and also from various question and answers which I am seeing. And I will try to summarize them and will try to really place before to come out with some concrete suggestion if it is possible. But I am very sure the tourism sector is not going to be dormant more than 45 to 50 days. So we should really see that it's not a very longer holiday. Maybe the situation will spring back to the same. That can take time, but it is not like this that we are going to be the jobless will continue, or these things or the people will remain idle for a very longer time. Not like this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Avinashi. And I think we had a very important and fruitful discussion, and where we have heard about that what is the crisis which is being faced by the travel and tourism industry, and the whole issue about the job losses and the regulatory compliance issues which the small companies are facing or going to face. And we have heard from Gaurav about what are the technological opportunities which may be looked at. And as a policy perspective, Nashi has highlighted the opportunity for the domestic travel sector, which is big enough. But I think the writing on the wall is clear that at least for 3 months, there is like serious trouble for paying of salaries, and especially by the small organizations. The big ones may have the deeper problems to handle, but the small organizations have a really tough time, and some relief, some support by the government, as has been looked at by many other government organizations across the world, will surely help. And as Ashish has pointed out, just 50,000 crores, which is not really big, and it can save millions of jobs. So I think that both of the points are there, that the industry may revive sooner than we think. But the point from CII and Faith is that we should not let it die. Because if that death happens, the building in the same level of companies, same level of organization, agility, it will take some time, and which may harm the job situation in this country. So there have been like multiple perspectives on this. I think like we had a good discussion, and we are hopeful that government is looking at the situation from all the sectors, and it has all the capabilities and expertise to look at from the holistic perspective, and it will of course take the right decisions which will be good for the country. So with this, we will like to close this, but before I do that, I will request all the audience and the speakers that we had this good discussions here, and we are having this deliberation live on the Facebook. So I will request each of you to go on the Elets Facebook page and the YouTube page and like and share this panel discussion, so that a lot more ideas and discussions emerge which will help everyone at the end of the day. So thanking you all for joining, and we are honored to have you. Namaskar. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.